Hey guys, what's going on? Welcome to another video and hope you guys are doing well today. And as promised, here is the Enhancement Shaman Encyclopedia. Now, the first thing we're going to look at is once you've selected your enhancement tree is talents. Now, in terms of talents, we have a pretty straightforward setup of what we want to do. Now, I'll go over these individually in a second, but this is where we come to our first breakhold. So 2 in elemental weapons gives us increased effect of our Flame Tongue, Wind Fury, and Unleash Elements, which we use all 3 of those abilities. 45% increased damage on Storm Strike. Improved shields. Now, this is something that, through Static Shock, we do actually proc Lightning Shield orb damage, so this is just a damage increase as well. Flurry increases the attack speed of our next 3 swings after a critical strike. We want to be maintaining this most of the time for enhancement, as well as Elemental Devastation. When you critically damage with a non-periodic spell, your chance to get a critical strike with melee attacks increases. Now, these kind of double dip into each other, in that the more you're critting with your spells, the more flurry procs you get, the more flurry procs you get, the more maelstrom, the more maelstrom, the more crits. Happy days. It's the circle of enhancement. Obviously, Storm Strike, Static Shock increases our damage just passively. Searing Flames is going to be a huge increase for us, just in general. We then have Unleash Rage, gives us some expertise as well as attack power. Shamanistic Rage gives us a defensive and removes mana cost for certain things. You could probably get away with not running this, but I think you'd be griefing. If you really wanted the talent point elsewhere, you could. So, we need 1 talent point. I tend to put it between these 2. If you have Ancestral Swiftness, it gives us reduced cast time of Ghost Wolf and increases our movement speed. Or Totemic Reach increases the range of your totem's effects by 15%. Now, since we're almost always going to be in melee, this is a kind of a choice thing, but I'm going to start in Ancestral Swiftness. Improved Lava Lash increases the damage of your Lava Lash ability by 20% for each application of Searing Flames. You can get some really, really, really big Lava Lashes from this. And it spreads your Flame Shock up to 4 targets nearby as well, which allows you to do some insane AoE cleave, like passive cleave. Maelstrom Weapon is just insane. The more you damage with a weapon, the more chance you have to get reduced cast time and mana cost. You can just pump out damage, healing, CC with Hex, all sorts. Feral Spirits, we do take Feral Spirits, but they aren't amazing. They do snapshot with attack power, so you're going to want to try and pump with them, but yeah, I mean, just use them on a 2-minute cooldown and forget about them. They're not particularly influential, although they do heal you quite a lot. Then we're going to go into Elemental, and this is where we're going to start having a couple of different choices. So on the first row, you have Acuity and Concussion. Now, early tiers, Acuity wins out in this decision. Just giving us more crit means that we're getting more uptime on Flurry and Elemental Devastation. But later on, when we start getting to a point where we have 100% uptime on those anyway, we're going to drop the point in Acuity and pick up Concussion just for a little bit more damage from Lightning Bolt, Shocks, all that sort of stuff. But to start with, Acuity is the way to go. The next talent then we need to look at is Reverberation. Now, the reduced cooldown of your shock spells is nice, but really minor. The main reason you would take this is for the 10-second cooldown reduction on your Wind Shear. Now, Wind Shear is already only a 15-second cooldown. This reduces it to a 5-second cooldown. If you were on duties like Maloriac kicking, then having this, or Helpless kicking, having Reverberation can be invaluable. But it doesn't provide you really any DPS increase. So, if you take this, you then have to choose between Call of Flame or Elemental Precision as to where the other points go. You have 3 spare points, and you can choose which ones you want to put it in. Elemental Precision gives you more single target damage and a little bit of AoE through the 3% fire increase. Call of Flame gives you substantially more AoE and a little bit of single target. So depending on what you want to do, for Heroics, I would suggest picking up Reverberation and Call of Flame. My talent points would look something like this for early Heroics. And then switching into, once I go into Raids, it's probably going to look something like this. If I'm not on kick duty, otherwise it will be with Reverberation if I am on kick duty. So yeah, that's the talents, and I hope that helps. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is stat weights. Now, I've actually done a lot of testing recently as to what our stats are going to look like in phase 1, what's going to be the best for us, and all that good stuff. Now, I talked in my pre-raid enhancement video about the stats that we need in terms of hit and expertise, but I'll cover them again just so they're in this video. Expertise is going to be the first thing we look at, and we need 26 expertise, which roughly works out to 465 after things like Unleash Rage and the 2 weapons in our for axe specialization. We just want it to total 26%. That's all we're looking for. But it is quite important we do this so we can't be dodged. As long as we're then behind the boss, we will never get parried. We can just not have to worry about anything at all. Secondly, then, is hit. Now, if you can see, my hit rating at the moment is actually 20%, and it looks wildly too high. And that's because we're actually looking at spell hit. This is really important for us because we want to make sure that none of our abilities can actually be missed. Things like lightning bolt, chain lightning, shocks are all spells, and they can be missed if you don't hit that 17%. So not having this makes your rotation feel really, really bad. And obviously it does help towards the melee hit as well, where we are getting quite a low chance to miss against bosses with white attacks as well. It's generating more maelstrom and so on and so forth. So they're the 2 things we're going to be looking at to start with. In terms of hit rating, if you want to get dead on, it's 1742 hit rating that you need for anything that isn't a Draenei. If it's a Draenei, it's 1% less. I don't know what that is. But yeah, after that then, we're going to be starting to look at our other stats. Now, crit and haste are they both provide DPS. Haste gives you more, obviously, quicker GCDs, more Maelstrom procs. Naturally, it gives you higher uptime on things like Flurry because you're critting more by hitting more. Elemental Devastation. Crit does something similar in that you might not hit as fast, but every time you hit, you have a higher chance to maintain those buffs. Mastery, however, just pumps. And in this latest test on the beta, I went super heavy mastery, probably a little bit more mastery than I have done in previous tests. And the results were really, really interesting. I was hitting extremely hard, competing on damage with other classes quite happily. And this is probably how I'm going to go on release, is very, very heavily mastery. Now, mastery was always our best stat, but I did try to balance it with a little bit of crit and haste. This time, just if I can reforge it, I'm already hit an expertise capped, it went into mastery. So that's what I would suggest at the moment. It just hits very, very, very hard. You have to remember, Lava Lash counts as fire, which is it covered under our mastery. Storm Strike counts as nature, counted under our mastery. Everything we do, this is basically just a damage increase every percentage that we get. So for me, mastery is king for stats. Next, I want to cover racials, and I'm actually going to start with Orc just because it is just the best race for an enhancement chamois. Doesn't matter what anyone else tells you, enhance, you want to be Orc. And the reason for that is actually axe specialization. While you have a fist weapon, axe, or 2-hand axes equipped, increases your expertise by 3. Now we have both of those equipped, and that increases our expertise by 6. Amazing. And this is how we're going to get so much of our expertise early on, is making sure we have fist weapons and axes equipped. Blood Fury naturally lines up with our wolves as well, which gives it, it snapshots with melee attack power. That's great. Spell power isn't irrelevant for us either, so this double dips, which is incredibly nice. And command actually does apply to feral spirits, as far as I know. I haven't done too much testing on this, but it should apply to feral spirits as well. So generally, everything that Orc brings is just good for enhancement chamois. But I'm sure people want to know about the other ones as well, so let's go through them. Tauren may stomp nearby enemies, so its War Stomp does a small little AoE stun on a 2-minute cooldown. Stuns is something that we do lack in the Shaman toolkit, so in terms of just utility, or maybe even PvP, Tauren isn't a horrible option. Our feral spirits can stun, but are really, really clunky to do so. So if you do want that, that's quite important. The maximum health increase is a bit of a bait because it is so minor you really won't notice. And the resistance to nature damage is not something you're really going to notice in Cataclysm either. So overall, I think the only reason you'd be playing Tauren is either for the Herbalism skill if it's just a Gatherer, or War Stomp. We then have Troll, and I would argue this is the second best option for things like, well, for Shami in general, but enhancement certainly. Berserk increases our attack and casting speed on I believe it's a 2 or 3 minute cooldown. It's basically like a little mini Bloodlust. Everything else that this class brings is kind of irrelevant to us. Reduced duration of movement, reducing effects obviously is quite nice. And for things like PvP, this is very good because enhancement does tend to get stunned, or kited even. But nothing else really gives us that much benefit. So the only reason you'd be picking Troll is for Berserk. We then have Goblin, which has a little bit of mobility in Rocket Jump, Natural Haste, which is just active all the time, which is actually really, really nice. And for Resto, I would look at this, but for enhancement, Orc just brings too much to us. Now, if you're one of those people that play Alliance, Draenei is probably going to be your pick. Now, I'm a dwarf fanboy. I'm 5'7" or something and look like a dwarf, so of course. But for Draenei, you get a self-heal, which is neither here nor there, but it can be quite nice. The big thing is going to be the chance to hit with melee and spell increase. It's 1%, doesn't seem that much, but it does make hitting those early caps much easier in terms of your hit rating for enhancement anyway. Then we have Dwarf. Dwarf offers very little. So increased expertise with maces is actually quite nice. There are some good maces that come from heroics, but later on into the tier when we start getting into raids, it's mainly going to be axes that we're going to get prioritized, or fist weapons. Take on a stone form, again, just allows us to have a little bit of an extra defensive. Not too bad in PvP, but generally the only benefit to a dwarf is increased expertise with maces. Like I said, if you're trying to be optimal, Orc is the way to go. Now let's talk professions. On screen you can see a list of all of the things that professions bring. Bearing in mind this is taken off a website that accounts for us being in Dragon Soul and having the epic gems. We won't have them in phase 1, so blacksmithing, like everything else, does give us the same 80 agility rather than 100. But generally I'm going to be looking at engineering through the use of Synapse Springs, giving us a on-use kind of increased cooldown that we can use to snapshot things with our feral spirits and things like that, as well as tailoring. Now, tailoring actually gives us the least amount of agility overall on average, but being able to snapshot it with other things and having that increased burst, for me personally, I think tailoring just wins. However, you could quite easily drop tailoring and pick up any of the other 80 agility things and be just as good. And even engineering. I would say engineering is a must for us just because of the helmet in the first phase. The cogwheels are amazing and really do help you with that hit and expertise cap. But generally, once you get past that, even engineering I wouldn't say is mandatory by any means. You can go for pretty much any of these and you'll be fine. Now it's time to go through each of our abilities and some of the interactions that we have as well. So let's get into it. Bind Elemental isn't particularly useful during Cataclysm. You may find niche situations where you can use it, but yeah, it's a form of CC that only used on elementals, similar to like a Banish. We have 3 setups of Call of the Ancestors, Call of the Elements, and Call of the Spirits. This is your totem setups. I tend to have 2 setups running, one with like a single target setup and one with an AoE setup. That just makes it easier for me. Chain Lightning is going to be used on any situation that there's more than 2 targets with Maelstrom stacks. So we won't ever naturally be casting this. We will only cast it with Maelstrom weapon, which we sort of talked about in our talents earlier. Earthshock then will be our filler shock. So because of Storm Strike, which I'll talk more about in a second, increases the chance to critically strike the enemy with nature spells. You know, that really works into our elemental devastation. So we're going to be using Earthshock quite regularly to bait crits and things like that. Earthbind Totem's just a nice little AoE pulse slow. Fire Elemental Totem. Now, for how much I talked this up in the Elemental Encyclopedia, Fire Elemental for enhancement is awful. Because it replaces your Searing Totem, and your Searing Totem has interactions with talents and Lava Lash that just make it overall do so much more damage. So, unfortunately for us, Fire Elemental Totem isn't going to beat out Searing Totem for us. So, we're pretty much never going to use this. Fire Nova is amazing. So, it got reworked to basically proc off targets that have Flame Shock and do an AoE pulse around them. It's on a 4-second cooldown with a Glyph, I believe. Yep. Oh no, the Glyph gives it increased radius now. But yeah, so it's something that you're going to use heavily in AoE. Flame Shock then is going to be something that we maintain on, certainly on at least one target. We're going to spread it with Lava Lash. If you are in AoE, you'll probably be proccing this on multiple targets and just trying to cast it on cooldown on multiple targets to get as many targets hitting with Fire Nova as possible. Sustained AoE is like one of Enhancement's strengths. Frost Shock then is a very, very niche ability. The threat aspect of it is almost null and void. It's not going to be something you have to worry about. Does a little bit of frost damage and slows the target. Again, I mean, you can use it, but it's more of a PvP thing. Hex then is something that can be used with Maelstrom Weapon, so you can remove the cast time of it. And it's like a really, well, it's a polymorph, effectively. Only works on humanoids and beasts. Has a long cooldown, so you don't want to just be spamming this. But for PvE, just hexing the target if it's getting a little bit too crazy, or PvP, hexing for kills and things like that, all very useful. Lava Burst then is something that we will almost never use as an enhancement. We may have some uses for it in PvP where we're stood at range and can't get to someone, we just want to cast something. But in terms of actual PvE, we won't use it because it doesn't benefit from Maelstrom Weapon. Lightning Bolt's going to be our single target Maelstrom spender. We're just going to use it every time we get to 4 or 5 stacks, and yeah, fire and forget, basically. We'll never actually hard cast this either. Magma Totem does take over from Searing Totem in AoE. Tend to use this on around 3 to 4 targets or anything more. Purge then removes a beneficial effect from the target. There's a couple of bosses where this is actually worthwhile having on your bars, and in PvP this is a godsend, so definitely have it somewhere accessible, but it isn't something you're going to be using all the time. Searing Totem then is going to be what we prioritize. Now there is a bug currently, as of the time of recording this video, where Searing Totem, if you place Searing Totem then start combat, it won't actually attack. Really, really annoying, so you need to make sure that you've engaged combat, like shock the target or something, or meleeed it once, then put Searing Totem down and it'll be fine for the rest of the fight. Spirit Walker's Grace is something I use during either ranged phases, so think like Atramedes' air phase, where he's gone into the air, I can't melee him, but I can sit there and actually Spirit Walker's Grace and just spam lightning bolts. You know, we still have a fair amount of spell power, and it just means that we aren't having complete DPS downtime. Otherwise, I use it for like running away and healing, but yeah, generally I try to use it as like a DPS cooldown when I can. Stoneclaw Totem in combination with the Glyph, which if I show you the Glyph here, gives you a shield equal to 4 times the strength. Now, we saw on the Elemental Encyclopedia video that this is actually quite a noticeable shield. On a 20-second cooldown, it can do quite a lot. So it's a defensive for you if you need it. But with Shamanistic Rage, I don't feel like I ever will use the shields, to be honest. It does cost a global, probably 2 globals when you think about it, because you have to reapply your other totem afterwards. So yeah, I'm not going to be using this all the time, but certainly early gear stages I will probably be using this quite a lot, and in PvP it's amazing. And then we have Wind Shear. Wind Shear is an interrupt. It also is like a threat reduction if you happen to need it, but you shouldn't really need that in Cataclysm. But yeah, I mean, it's a interrupt, can be reduced to 5 seconds, really cool. Let's get into enhancement then. Second Hearthstone, pretty nice, 7.5 minute cooldown. That's why Shami's are the best. Bloodlust, you're one of 2 classes that now brings Bloodlust. 3 classes that now brings Bloodlust. Mage brings Bloodlust, Shaman brings Bloodlust, and Beastmaster Hunter, I also believe, brings Bloodlust. In general, it'll be whoever needs this. Again, we're still going to be wanting to pop our wolves before Bloodlust, so if you have a mage in the group, having them prop Time Warp, if you're going to be delaying your wolves for like a snapshot or things like that, and then you just pop Bloodlust afterwards, can work. Otherwise, the group just needs to wait for you. You're the boss. You got the Bloodlust button. Now, Earth Elemental Totem is something where, in theory, it is a DPS increase. And I say in theory because, you know, it can taunt the boss. It can taunt ads. It can be annoying just because of the way it functions. It is supposed to be like a target dummy. If it doesn't interact negatively in any way, it just sits there punching the boss and does very minimal damage. But it is technically a DPS increase if you have the buffs covered from your totems. Elemental Resist Totem. If we have the Healing Stream Totem, which I will always be running, then Elemental Resist Totem isn't something that I plan on using very often. Farsight's pretty cool. Just whoop. Ta-da. We can see far. Obviously, Feral Spirits is our wolves. I'm going to pop Feral Spirits and just talk through what they can do. They have a stun that they can use on a 45-second cooldown. Obviously, you only get 1 use of this. They have a taunt. Maybe worth turning this taunt off. And they have a movement speed that increases the movement speed of you and the wolves. I use this all the time just to like get a speed boost. So maybe something you want to macro into being able to use, because this movement speed is amazing. It's like a 15-second movement speed, 60% sprint as well. It's pretty nuts. But yeah, generally, these are the wolves. They do wolf things. Flame Tongue Totem is not something that you're going to be expected to bring as an enhancement. In fact, it would be pretty grief of the group to ask you to Flame Tongue Totem because we lose out on Searing Flames. If they're going to do that, then yeah, your DPS is just not going to be worth bringing. Flame Tongue Weapon, however, you will be putting on your offhand. It increases the damage you do by Lava Lash substantially and does a decent amount of damage in itself. So yeah, you're pretty much always going to want Flame Tongue Weapon on your offhand. Frostband Weapon, this is something that can be used in PvP, just for keeping consistent slows on the target. However, yeah, I mean, you're never going to use it in PvE. Ghost Wolf, then, is somewhere that you can put it nice and easy. If you are running the talent for Ancestral Swiftness, then this can go down to an instant cast with increased movement speed. Pretty nice. Grounding Tome can just soak a cast that's cast at you. It would have to be specifically cast at you. Or specifically cast at a person near the totem. So, like AoE effects like Magma or Volcano, because it's not cast directly at a person, it's a ground effect, it can't be grounded. There's some things that can be grounded in the raid, but there's a lot that just can't, so you'll have to find niche uses for this yourself, but yeah. Lava Lash hits very hard now, spread your Flame Shock around. Yeah, it's just a nice ability now. Low cooldown as well, so you're going to hit very hard with this. Because of Lava Lash, you're always going to want a slow offhand weapon. Lightning Shield, we're always going to want to make sure we have Lightning Shield on ourselves because of Static Shock. Now, this does actually stop you from consuming a charge when Static Shock procs. However, I do tend to run the Glyph as well, just because if the boss pulses AoE damage or whatever, we don't want it to consume our Lightning Shield charges. Primal Strike is a strange one, because once we have Storm Strike, we never use Primal Strike. It's just, it doesn't fit in the rotation. It's kind of the melee hit that they give you for leveling, but yeah, I mean, it's pretty bad. Rock Biter increases your threat generation by 30% and reduces your damage taken by 5%. Run 2 of these and you can be an uber shaman tank. No, I'm kidding. There's very little uses for this. You can have like a weapon swap in case you need to taunt the boss and run away or something, which I will probably have a macro to do, but generally, yeah, you're never going to use this button. Shamanistic Rage isn't as important as it was in Wrath. It gives you 30% damage reduction and removes the mana cost of like your offensive skills or totems and things like that. So yeah, it's more of a defensive now than anything else. Can be used while stunned, which is really nice. So generally, yeah, I mean, it's not going to be used on cooldown now, which is nice. Stone Skin Totem. Now, if this works anything like some of the private servers, this actually occasionally stacks with Devotion Aura. So this is something that I do tend to run quite often. But if I'm the only one bringing the Strength of Earth buff, I'm bringing Strength of Earth. I want the damage. Storm Strike then increases the damage done. It's just increases damage and it applies the debuff for your nature spells. Strength of Earth Totem, as I said, this is going to be my primary Earth Totem. Increases our strength and agility by 549, which is insane. Unleash Elements. Finally, a spec that uses Unleash Elements. It's such a cool ability and was so wasted. But based on your current weapon imbuements, this does different things. So if I just cast this really quick, with Wind Fury, it gives 60% increased attack speed with multiple charges and increases the damage done by your next fire spell by having Flame Tongue up. Now, we're going to use this to reset or refresh Flame Shock. We can also use this to pump a massive Fire Nova once we've spread all our dots as well. So there's loads you can do with Unleash Elements. I use it quite a lot as like dead spots in rotations. So, yeah. Water Walking is great. Wind Fury Totem is going to be our default air totem. Wind Fury Weapon is going to be our main hand imbuement. And Wrath of Air, you can bring it, but I would only ever take Wrath of Air over Wind Fury if someone else is bringing the Wind Fury buff. In terms of Resto then, go through them really quick. For some reason, everyone that can cast Res also has Mass Res. I mean, it's just a nice quality of life, I guess. Chain Heal. If you're going to go down the Heal Hunt spec, then Chain Heal is going to be something you use a lot with Maelstrom Weapon. You can use any of the heals with Maelstrom Weapon and they'll be instant, free cast at 5 stacks. Cleanse Spirit. We're one of the few melee classes that can actually do a cleanse of any sort and remove curses. There's very few curses that actually occur in tier 11, but it can be useful. Earth Living Weapon. Again, not something you're going to be using very often unless you go down Heal Hunts, which I'm going to do a separate video about and talk about the memery that is Heal Hunts. Great Healing Wave. Now, once I go into Resto Encyclopedia, you'll see the differences between the heals, but you have Healing Wave, which is kind of long cast, low mana, medium heal. Great Healing Wave is high mana, high cost, high heal. Now, Maelstrom Weapon reduces the cost of this and the cast time, making Greater Healing Wave like the only heal we are ever going to use. So I use this one on my bars. It's my single target heal. I never use the other ones. I use Chain Heal, but I don't use the single target ones. Healing Rain, again, can be applied with Maelstrom Weapon. So something to keep in mind. Puts a circle on the floor, like Efflorescence for Druids. Healing Stream Totem, going to be my default water totem. Just always going to have this down. Increases resistances, passive healing over time. It's just great. Healing Surge. I sometimes will have this on my bars for emergencies. It's a high mana cost, short cast time, kind of medium high heal. You would only use this in the situations where it's like, okay, I'm desperate, I need a heal, and no one's healing me. But even then, I would probably just use Great Healing Wave, to be honest with you. And Healing Wave, I'm never going to use personally. Mana Spring Totem, you can bring this buff to the group. There's only a couple of classes that can bring it. But make sure the resistances are covered by another class as well. Reincarnation is obviously great. Totem of Tranquil Mind. It's 30% less cast or channeling time when damaged. Never going to use this. Never even going to press this totem. Totemic Recall gives you 25% of the mana required to cast each totem destroyed by Totemic Recall. So if I put all my totems down and then I Totemic Recall, I can remove them, get a lot of that mana back. It's pretty nice, pretty good in Heroics where you're going to be moving from pack to pack. Just clear the totems up behind you as you go. Tremor Totem's amazing now. It treats like a trinket for fears, sleeps, and charms. So if you are affected by any of them, you can just drop Tremor even while affected by them, and it will just instantly remove you and the group. And Water Shield is something we are never, ever going to use. So that's all of the spells. Next thing will be rotation. So yeah, let's get into it. So in terms of rotation then, we have a couple of different things we want to keep in mind. The first thing is assuming there are no bugs, Blizzard, we want to put down our totems first. Strength of Earth, Searing, Healing Stream, and Wind Fury is going to be my defaults. And then we're going to approach the boss. Now, if I'm going to do a quick little pull timer, hopefully this works. We've got a 10-second pull timer. I'm going to pre-pot around 3. So pre-pot now, start running in, unleash elements, flame shock, and then get into my rotation. Now at this point, I'm hoping that I've got a couple of procs, which I actually have no trinket procs right now, Blizzard. So we've got a couple of trinket procs now, pop my wolves, and that's us getting into our rotation. And in terms of the rotation then, so let's just stop that really quick, because that's my opener. Unleash elements, flame shock, storm strike. Hopefully by then we've got a couple of trinket procs. If not, we carry on, lava lash, so on. As soon as we've got our trinket procs, we're going to pop our feral spirits, and we're going to send it into the boss. You can see, like, we were doing 17k DPS there, no bloodlust, and no raid buffs. We absolutely can pump on the opener. Enhancement's scary for how much damage you can do off the bat like that. Now, in terms of our rotation, it's a bit of a priority order. And you can kind of see that my weak aura here, found in my Discord, you should join, is going to cover most of our priority order for us. So we're going to want to make sure that we're keeping Flame Shock up on the target. And then it's going to be Storm Strike, Lava Lash with Searing Flame stacks. So if I just put a Searing Totem down, you can see if the Searing Totem works, it's going to get stacks of Searing Flames. And when I hit this with a Lava Lash, you know, it does a decent amount of damage. We did like a 15k Lava Lash there, no on crit. And it's already back up to 5 stacks. So it's something you're going to want to prioritize. It's why we wait until our first Lava Lash for like a couple of globals. We should already be able to have like 4 or 5 stacks by then. And then we just keep repeating it like that. So yeah, in terms of our rotation, that's kind of what it looks like at the moment. In terms of Maelstrom weapon then, and this is where people that have played Enhancement in Wrath of the Lich King are going to get a little bit like, oh my god, do we weave, do we not? Sometimes. Now, in Cataclysm, in Wrath, you didn't have as many abilities to press. You had the same abilities to press lots. So things like Magma Totem, you were always putting Magma Totem down, you were Fire and Overing on cooldown, things like that. Whereas now you have more abilities, but they are less spammy. So you can weave if you've got nothing else to press. But if I just go through my rotation, I'm going to go through like a minute DPS rotation in a second, and I'll talk you through what I'm doing. But generally, I'm not needing to weave because I've run out of abilities to press. And for me, just keeping pressing other abilities are better. So I hope that makes sense as to what I'm saying. I'm going to do a pull timer and get in on the boss, and I'll talk through what I'm doing as we go. So putting my totems down, I'm going to have to re-put my Searing Totem down because the game is broken. Going to pop our pre-pot, run in, unleash elements, flame shock, fail to jump up on the platform, Searing Totem. Again, Searing Totem shouldn't be bugged, but it is. And yeah, we get into it. Totems, trinkets of proc, so we're going to pop Feral Spirits. This is where we would Bloodlust as well. Our Feral Spirits aren't even attacking now, which is amazing. And we start getting into just our standard rotation now, where we're going to be shocking as much as possible without letting Flame Shock drop. You can see right now we're in a weird spot, so I Fire Nova'd. But we have a Storm Strike back up. We've got another Unleash Elements coming back up, ready for our next Flame Shock. So, Flame Shock now. Fire Nova. And again, we're just going through, at the moment, there's no abilities off cooldown. So, we're just going to wait for our next one, you know? Right now, we've got Storm Strike up. We've got 5 stacks of Maelstrom. We've got nothing up, so we're going to Fire Nova. Nothing up, so we're going to Unleash Elements. Going to refresh our Flame Shock. Going to actually consume our Lava Lash before Storm Strike there because we had 5 stacks and it was off cooldown, so we wanted to get them refreshing. Nothing off cooldown right now, so we're just going to wait. But you can see it's quite a slow-paced rotation now. It's not as spammy as it was in Wrath by any means. And you're effectively trying to manage multiple buffs. You're trying to maintain your Flame Shock with Unleash Elements. You're trying to never overcap on Maelstrom Weapon. You're trying to never let your Searing Flame sit at 5 stacks for too long. You want to consume them with Lava Lash. So the whole rotation just becomes this juggling act. But you can see there, I was pulling 20 odd K DPS for a little while there, wasn't I? Where was the numbers? 19 K DPS? Yeah, I mean, you can see just how much DPS this class is capable of. No raid buffs, no anything else. Like, we are absolutely going to pump in our first phase. Now, in terms of macros and weak auras, again, I did this in the elemental one. I'm not going to tell you exactly what you need or what I have. I'm going to tell you what I would recommend you going to get. So something that tracks your totem timers, something that tracks the cooldowns of certain abilities. Again, this is kind of a hybrid of my 2 weak auras. I actually have a different weak aura in my Discord that you should go and get that's much better than this one. I just haven't imported the new one. In terms of macros, I have this Stormstrike macro, which is show tooltip Stormstrike, start attack, pet attack, cast Stormstrike. Now, what this will do is make sure that you're always actually meleeing the boss. And if you have your Feral Spirits, they don't ever just stand around like they were doing before for me. And then Feral Spirits, I have show tooltip Feral Spirit, pet defensive, pet attack, cast Blood Fury, cast Feral Spirit. Now, you can put Spirit Walk somewhere else. I have it in this just for ease of use. I don't always use it like this, though. The reason I have this macro like this, so you're going to summon them, and then you're going to cast Pet Defensive. Now, they automatically spawn on aggressive. So having this macro, if I just show you here, automatically summons them on Pet Defensive, which makes life just so much easier for you. You don't have to worry about them running off and just doing dumb stuff. You can also use this as a pet attack as well, so you can send them in. And they're going to get sent in with Spirit Walk, which is why I like it. If I need Spirit Walk for something else during the fight, I tend to take it out of the macro just for that. But generally, this is what I use. Obviously, Blood Fury, I will have my Engineering Gloves in there on live as well. But yeah, so that's kind of my setup in terms of macros. Very simple. I'll occasionally have like a mouse over kick macro, but right now I'm not using that. So yeah, and in terms of weak auras, like I said, the weak aura pack that's in my Discord is the best one that I can come up with. That's where I would be going for my weak aura if you're interested. It isn't this one, it's much better. I'm sure you can see some of the gameplay I've done in recent videos to see the weak aura. So yeah, that's kind of everything for the enhancement chamois thing. Glyphs. Did I talk about glyphs? I don't think I did. I'm going to talk briefly about glyphs here and hope that people actually get to it. Wind Fury Weapon is going to be your flex glyph. You can switch between this, Flame Shock, Feral Spirits. So they're the 3 that you'd switch between. Wind Fury Weapon gives you the highest sustained damage. Feral Spirits gives you the highest burst damage. Flame Shock gives you the best AoE damage. There's your combinations in terms of what you'd run in that glyph slot. Otherwise, you'll be running Storm Strike and Lava Lash always. In your major glyphs, Healing Stream Totem, Lightning Shield, and Fire Nova. Again, I wouldn't change any of these 3 ever. And then in your middle ones, you can just run whatever. I would always make sure you have Renewed Life. But yeah, so that's kind of everything. Hope you guys have enjoyed. More videos coming soon. And any questions, leave them in the comments below. You guys absolutely blew up the Elemental Encyclopedia. So let's see what we can do for this one. Thank you for watching. More videos coming soon. And peace.